Herzlich willkommen im Verteidigungsministerium. Minister Pistorius hat zum 5-Format eingeladen. Minister Pistorius invited us to the format. Mr. Healy, Mr. Polen und Staatssekretär Rauti from Italy, and this is the order of statements, and then we take questions.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to everybody. Bienvenue, especially to the four of you, Sebastian, Jean, Vladislav and Isabella. Ich freue mich sehr, dass wir uns heute hier im 5er-Format Group of Five hier in Berlin getroffen haben. 5 Vertreter in Europa, die entschlossen sind, Ideen zu entwickeln, voranzugehen und Europas Verteidigungsbereitschaft weiter voranzutreiben. Wir sind diejenigen mit den größten Rüstungsausgaben in Europa und wir haben heute eine offene Diskussion geführt, eine, die notwendig war und die uns weitergebracht hat. Dafür zunächst noch vielen Dank. Das war ein offenes, klares, an der sachorientiertes Gespräch, basierend auf viel Vertrauen und freundschaftlicher Verbindung. Und diese Group of Five ist kein exklusiver Kreis, es kann und wird sich sicher erweitern, aber das heutige Treffen war der Auftakt zu weiteren Gesprächen. Verabredet hatten das Sebastian und ich bei unserem Treffen am 6. November, 12 Stunden nach dem Ergebnis der amerikanischen Wahlen. Wir wollten damals diesen Weg einschlagen, weil klar ist, mit einem neuen Präsidenten Trump, mit einer neuen Administration werden sich bestimmte Dinge verändern, je früher wir uns darauf einstellen, desto besser. Und selbstverständlich stimmen wir uns auch in dem fortlaufenden Prozess weiter eng ab mit unseren europäischen Partnern und mit der Europäischen Union. Ein Wort zur aktuellen Situation in Europa. Wir gehen auf den dritten Kriegswinter zu des völkerrechtswidrigen Krieges, den Russland gegen die Ukraine führt, jetzt seit deutlich mehr als 1000 Tagen. Russland geht besonders aggressiv vor in der Ukraine mit Luftschlägen, vor allem gegen zivile Infrastruktur. Jeden Tag viele tausend Todesopfer. Und zur Wahrheit gehört, die russischen Drohgebärden sind eben immer auch gleichzeitig an uns gerichtet, entweder mittelbar oder unmittelbar. Das haben die Verlautbarungen der letzten Wochen und Monate deutlich gezeigt aus Moskau. Der russische Krieg gegen die Ukraine ist faktisch, wenn man auf die Beteiligten im Hintergrund oder auch auf dem Schlachtfeld, wenn man sich das anschaut, kein regionaler Konflikt mehr hat, eine internationale Dimension bekommt. Putin hat nicht nur 10.000 Soldaten aus Nordkorea ins Land geholt, dafür zahlt Putin, Sarah Osterummer heute noch einmal bestätigt, pro Kopf einmalig 2.000 Euro pro Soldat. Das ist ein Zynismus, kaum noch zu überbieten. Putin eskaliert weiter. Es hat eine Mittelstreckenrakete eingesetzt auf die ukrainische Nordlinie. Was heißt das für unsere Ukraine-Unterstützung? Das war das zweite große Thema neben der Frage, wie stellen wir uns als Europäer jetzt auf? Wie geht es weiter mit der Ukraine-Unterstützung? Wir haben Russland immer auf zugeschaltet, und eine Lehre aus dem Gespräch, es hätte der Bestätigung der Bekräftigung nicht bedurft, und trotzdem war es gut. Wir werden die ukrainische Rüstungsindustrie verstärkt weiter unterstützen und in ihrem Aufbau begleiten, weil es die Geschwindigkeit dessen erhöht, das Material im ukrainischen Streitkräften zur Verfügung steht. Und wir werden das tun. Im ersten Schritt mit Einnahmen aus dem Win for Profits, ein erster wichtiger Schritt, der genau dazu beiträgt. Wir werden die Zusammenarbeit weiter aufbauen in allen Capability Coalitions, etwa bei der Entwicklung und Beschaffung von KI-gesteuerten Drohnen, bei der Munitionsproduktion. Ich will noch mal sagen, noch vor einem Jahr gab es ein Verhältnis bei der Artilleriemunition von etwa 10 bis 12 auf russischer Seite zu 1 bis 2 auf ukrainischer Seite. Heute haben wir fast Parität. Das heißt, diese Bemühungen in Europa und darüber hinaus Artilleriemunition zu beschaffen und Produktion hochzufahren, waren erfolgreich, aber die müssen eben auch fortgesetzt werden. Unser Ziel, die Ukraine muss aus einer Position der Stärke heraus agieren. Eine weitere Lehre muss die Umwurf hat uns klargemacht und ausdrücklich darum gebeten, das Format der Ukraine-Kontaktgruppe, der UDCG, dass das sehr wichtig ist und dass es beibehalten werden sollte. Wir teilen das ausdrücklich. Es hilft uns unter anderem ein einheitliches Lagebild zu bekommen und es hilft der Ukraine, die UDCG-Treffen sorgen dafür, dass immer wieder das Commitment
that commitments are renewed and funds are being made available. Money is being pooled to support Ukraine. The five of us want to keep the UDCG format alive and keep supporting it. And from January onwards, NSATO in Wiesbaden will take on the coordination of efforts for Ukraine. And for us, it's clear the capability gaps and the gaps in manning and personnel that still exist in NSATO need to be closed swiftly. What's our to-do list? Regardless of whether in the future defense budgets will rise or are supposed to rise to 2, 2.5 or 3%, we need to close our capability gaps. This is the most important thing. We need to have the capabilities at hand that we don't have yet to make sure that we can provide what we need, which is effective deterrence. We need to develop more weapon systems together, produce and procure together. And that is something we agreed on today. And we are aware of the advantages. We can share the same standards. We save costs in development and also in maintaining the equipment with our European Sky Shield initiative. ESSI, we are already strengthening air defense to a considerable degree, and we have also launched a similar framework for with ELSA, the European Long Strike Approach. We are all part of that initiative ELSA. We want to also procure long-range air-based systems. And we also want to develop and procure land-based systems of long range. And we have made great experience with OCCA, for example. It's an organization for armaments cooperation that has gathered a lot of expertise and experience in the past. And we would also like to have Poland to be a member. I think Poland is an observer state, and we want Poland to become a full member of OCCA. And we will support Poland on that path. And we know that this week we will get for the first time a defense commissioner, which you could also call an armaments commissioner. One clear demand from our side is this: the access for the defense industry to the financial market, to loans, for example, needs to be facilitated. It needs to be easier, just as easy as it is for other sectors. And the European Investment Bank is playing a central role in that. We also agreed that the next meeting of this group will take in Poland. Thank you, Vladislav, for the invitation. We are thinking about having our next meeting early next year so that we are speeding things up here, and we will focus then on two topics that we want to discuss in more concrete terms to derive more steps. And now I hand over to my friend and colleague Sébastien.
Merci infiniment. Merci Boris. Merci mes chers collègues, mesdames et messieurs.
Thank you, Boris. Thank you, esteemed colleagues.
Je ne veux pas être trop long car Boris a déjà dit beaucoup de
once again for your willingness to join us for this meeting. I don't want to talk for a long time. I want to keep it short. It's a unique format. It's unprecedented. We have never gotten together in this format. It's a continental European format, a European format that is not just an EU format, but that includes the UK. That is so relevant because we share the same security concerns, and it is of concern to the entire continent of Europe. And this meeting is also taking place at a very important point in time. We have a new Secretary General at NATO, we have a new Commission in the European Union, and we have also seen that there is a new administration in the United States, so this is a very important point in time. We have a EU High Representative for Security and Defense Policy in the EU, and so this is a crossroads for our NATO alliance with the EU, etc. And also we have seen that the conflict in Ukraine is escalating. Russia decided to ask North Korea to get involved in this war and to support Russia. You all know this very well. And so that means that this conflict has escalated. We are also witnessing escalations of the conflict in the Middle East, which brings challenges of its own. And Boris, let me say thank you very much for having organized this meeting. We wanted to have an informal framework, an informal setting in which we can discuss all these measures and all the other formats that we have at NATO or at the EU or at the G7 in Naples just recently at the invitation of our Italian colleague Guido. All these formats exist, but we also discussed all the issues that I mentioned earlier. But what I would like to say is that we invited Rustem Umerov, the Ukrainian defense minister, to our our meeting today. He joined us virtually.
Formé dans les camps de Champagne est parti rejoindre le théâtre ukrainien.
Heard from him that a brigade for Kyiv is supposed to be established and that will be used in Ukraine, and we are willing to support Ukraine in that endeavor. And the Ukrainian defense minister also asked us for continued support when it comes to training Ukrainian service members. The training is supposed to be complementary to other EU training initiatives and complementary with everything that we're doing in Poland as regards training Ukrainian service members. When it comes to windfall profits, there have been challenges to tackle. The European taxpayers, the French taxpayers will welcome the fact that we are so innovative when it comes to fund our support in different ways. Over the next few weeks, we will launch the important measures. For example, we will provide Mistral and other weapon systems that we want to provide to Ukraine, together with Italy, for example, in part. And this is all funded through the windfall profits with the frozen assets from Russia and the interest paid on that. And we also discussed other issues. For example, we talked about what we need in terms of short-term crisis management. We talked about the two fields, the one in Ukraine and the one in the Middle East. And we talked about what we need to do long-term as regards those theaters. We need to think about the approach to the security and defense in the next 10 to 15 years. Which hybrid threats play a role? Do we have maritime threats in space? Are there threats to critical infrastructure? And all these are important aspects of security. I would like to underline once again that we are a member country of NATO and of the EU, and we are fulfilling our budgetary obligations. We have a budget of 5.5 billion euros for next year. This is 3 billion euros more than before 2022, and so we are going far beyond the 2% goal in NATO. But one thing is even more crucial. What are we doing with those funds? What are we doing with that money? We need to make sure that these more than 2% of GDP are being used in a reasonable way, so that we have at hand what it is that we need to protect the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, or the North Sea, or the Baltic Sea. So we need to use this money to develop military capabilities for example, the land forces in various countries, and that is important that we highlight that here too. This is a challenge we're facing right now. The development of the defense industry is also important, just as the support to Ukraine. With the support to Ukraine, we have seen that we needed to reform our procurement model, and we are at the beginning of this reform process. I took office 2.5 years ago, and 2.5 years ago, you had to fight against the taxonomy proposals in Europe, because there have been initiatives that questioned what the European industries do in terms of armaments projects and what they provide. And then 2.5 years later, suddenly everyone wants to speed up the processes and produce more and produce faster. And there are suggestions and proposals on the table. Ukraine has shown us that we need large numbers of material, large masses, and we have seen that the attacks in Israel and Iran, for example, require high-tech development and assets, and we are facing two major challenges in this vein. So we need sustainability in our equipment, and at the same time, we need to develop new systems and complex systems. And so there is strength in numbers, for sure. We're stronger when we're united. We have a new EU Commission, as I pointed out earlier, and the security matters are matters of sovereignty. Each and every member state needs to make its own decisions and determine the path for itself. But at the end of the day, we have an internal market and we have a framework regulation to support our defense industry. This will help our industry, and that's a topic that is of importance. The same applies to our subcontractors. And in our format, we have to deal with questions regarding the future in this area, because there are plans to secure production capacities and supply chains, especially in our future armaments projects. Regarding our capability gaps, of course, we are drawing conclusions and seeing lessons learned from the past. Boris talked about ELSA. In ELSA, we are trying to produce ground-based long-range systems. We are thinking about expanding this, though, and we will make quick progress here, because this very much touches upon our capability to provide security for the European continent. It's not so much because of the threat from the East, but also because of threats emanating from the Middle East. I could mention many other aspects that we discussed, but the discussion this afternoon showed us and showed our political directors and our teams that they are being issued a mandate to elaborate proposals for the white paper on defense by the European Union. So these are topics for the Commission that wants to develop such a white paper. And so we need contributions from the EU member states. We need to share our considerations, and now we want to do that in cooperation with the UK, because no security concept must be developed without the close cooperation and our trusted partnership with the UK. This is one aspect that I would like to highlight here, because it is important that the EU and the UK coordinate very closely on security matters.
Bravo, Boris, for congratulations for bringing our 5 nations together for the first time as E5. Together we are the 5 largest defence spenders in Europe. Together we're responsible for more than 1/5 of the total NATO defence spending, and we're responsible for 2/3 of Europe's NATO defence spending. And you bring us together as a landmark meeting, and it comes at a crunch moment for Ukraine's security and European security. I think the fact that we've come together as the E5 very clearly signals that we will stand unified and ready to protect our continent from aggressors. We will stand firm in the face of Putin's threats, and that together we will be ready to deter any expansion of Russian aggression. On Ukraine, first and foremost, we discussed with Rustem Umerov the need to redouble our support for Ukraine, because the defence of Europe, the defence of the UK starts in Ukraine, and if Putin prevails in Ukraine, he will not stop there, because his objective is the destabilisation of democracies across our continent. And so we will continue stepping up our support for Ukraine. We'll stand firm together for Ukraine. And last week, the UK committed further support to Ukraine, and also marked the point at which we have trained with allies 50,000 Ukrainian soldiers to support their fight against Putin's illegal full-scale invasion. As part of this meeting, we also reaffirmed our shared commitment to NATO, a united commitment to the transatlantic alliance that has never been greater, an alliance that has never been stronger, an alliance that is the most successful military alliance in history. And we're determined to make sure that the E5 will play a leading part in continuing that success story in the future. We all recognise that defence spending must increase. It must increase in the face of global rising threats. So we're boosting spending on European defence. We are binding our defence industries more closely together, and we're looking to ensure that the UK is an intrinsic part of the European defence industry. More broadly, we will work together for peace and security more broadly throughout the world. For example, increasing coordination in the Indo-Pacific and in the Middle East, where we all call for an end to hostilities, the release of all hostages, a two-state solution in the end that ensures the long-term security of both the Palestinians and of Israel. But let me end on this message, if I may, as the war in Ukraine enters a critical stage. This is the time for Europe to step up on our security and on our collective defence. We're working together to strengthen NATO's eastern flank. We're working together to strengthen collaboration on developing air defences and long-range missiles. We're working together to strengthen industrial programmes between our leading companies. This meeting today, Boris, I think, sends a resounding message that leading European nations will do whatever is necessary to protect our continent from those who threaten us, and as European allies, we will take on more responsibility for the defence and security of our continent. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo, drogi gospodarzu, drogi Borysie, drodzy przyjaciele. To duży zaszczyt być z Wami dzisiaj tutaj. Jesteśmy w takich czasach, że bez bezpieczeństwa wszystko jest niczym. Bez bezpieczeństwa wszystko jest niczym. To jest sentencja, którą ja wynoszę z tego spotkania, on bardzo ją wyraził Boris Pistorius w swoim wystąpieniu. I ona nam wszystkim przyświeca. Jeżeli ktoś ma dzisiaj jasnym i wyraźnym głosem mówić do swoich obywateli, to mogą to zrobić ministrowie obrony. Powinni to zrobić ministrowie obrony. Muszą to zrobić ministrowie obrony. Nie straszyć, ale mówić o tym, że w każdej sytuacji trzeba być gotowym i przygotowanym. Że mamy być gotowi na każdy, nawet najtrudniejszy scenariusz. I tym spotkaniem potwierdzamy swoje sojusznicze zobowiązania, za co bardzo serdecznie dziękuję. Że musimy zrobić wszystko dzisiaj, żeby wspierać Ukrainę i po to było nasze łączenie z ministrem Umerowem, żeby wiedzieć na bieżąco każdego dnia, każdego tygodnia, czego Ukraina wciąż potrzebuje. Dobrze wiemy, jak ważne jest to skoordynowanie działań w tym transferze wsparcia dla Ukrainy, czy humanitarnej, czy militarnej pomocy, którą okazujemy. Jesteśmy dzisiaj zobowiązani powiedzieć jasno i wyraźnie, Europa musi zwiększyć swoje wysiłki na rzecz pomocy Ukrainie, ale przede wszystkim również na rzecz zwiększenia swojego bezpieczeństwa. Bez zwiększonych wydatków, bez świadomości tego w każdym społeczeństwie europejskim. W jakich czasach żyjemy, wszystko jest niższe. Bez świadomości, jak ważne jest dzisiaj bezpieczeństwo. Wszędzie, gdzie jesteśmy, będziemy myślę to powtarzać. I do tego jesteśmy zobowiązani jako ministrowie obrony. Mamy teraz bardzo ważną rolę do odegrania w naszych państwach, ale też we współdziałaniu w Unii Europejskiej, współdziałaniu z Wielką Brytanią, przyjaźni ze Stanami Zjednoczonymi. Chciałbym, żeby to wybrzmiało, to wszyscy też w swoich wystąpieniach podkreślali, jak bardzo ważne są dla nas relacje ze Stanami Zjednoczonymi, relacje transatlantyczne, które są podstawą do naszej cywilizacji od wielu, wielu lat i będą zawsze podstawą naszej cywilizacji. Ale Europa musi coraz więcej koordynować swoich działań, musi wspólnić swoje działania, musi podnosić sobie sama poprzeczkę, żeby być dobrym partnerem również do współpracy ze Stanami Zjednoczonymi. To jest nasze ważne zadanie, które ministrowie obrony, myślę, że jak rzadko w historii się zdarza, mają przed sobą. I dobrze, że z inicjatywy Borysa przy wielkim wsparciu Sebastiana udało się stworzyć to dzisiejsze spotkanie, tę formułę, która nie ma zastąpić żadnej innej formuły, ale ma usprawnić i bardziej skoordynować działania. Jesteśmy reprezentantami tej wizji świata wartości, które są dzisiaj tak bardzo potrzebne, które potrzebują naszej obrony i naszego zaangażowania na Ukrainie,
want to defend the values that we need so much of engagement in Ukraine, but also in Europe is crucial. It's not just about helping those who fight, it's also standing up for ourselves. It's about looking after our populations now and in the future. I'm very grateful for this resolve and for the clear statement that was
Francji, Wielkiej Brytanii i Włoch. Spotkamy się w Polsce na początku przyszłego roku. To jest dobre miejsce do rozmowy na temat pomocy dla Ukrainy, bo ta pomoc płynie przede wszystkim przez Polskę. To jest dobre miejsce do rozmowy o bezpieczeństwie wschodniej flanki NATO. To jest dobre miejsce do rozmowy o zwiększonych wydatkach na obronę. Polska dzisiaj wydaje 4,2, w przyszłym roku 4,7% PKB, więc jest to na pewno dobre miejsce do rozmowy o tym, co Europa powinna zrobić. Unia Europejska we współpracy z Wielką Brytanią. I obecność i rozmowa na pewno w najbliższej przyszłości z komisarzem do spraw obronnych, do spraw przemysłu zbrojeniowego europejskiego jest nam potrzebna, bo inwestycja w przemysł zbrojeniowy jest dzisiaj racją stanu wszystkich naszych państw. To prawda, co też padało, chyba Sebastian, ty to mówił, to nie było popularne jeszcze chwilę temu, mówienie w ogóle o przemyśle zbrojeniowym. A dzisiaj oczekuje się ogromnego zaangażowania. My jesteśmy w stanie to wykonać. Ja wierzę, że Europa jest w stanie znów być latarnią dla świata w tym działaniu. To musi być pełne zrozumienie nas wszystkich, naszych wszystkich obywateli. Bez wsparcia społeczności nigdy nie osiągniemy sukcesu, więc o to bym chciał poprosić. Wsparcie europejskiej wspólnoty na rzecz wysiłku przemysłu zbrojeniowego, który musi zwielokrotnić swoje wydania. Potrafiliśmy stworzyć plan po COVID. To musi być na stać, żeby stworzyć plan na rzecz pokoju, na rzecz tego, żeby nie było wojny, która zaleje cały świat. Musi być na to stać Unii Europejskiej, musi być na to stać nasze społeczeństwa. Jeszcze raz bardzo dziękuję za ten format i za to spotkanie.
Populations, our world needs to be able to afford being able to do something about it again. Thank you.
All'incontro il ministro della difesa italiana Guido Crosetto, abbiamo molto apprezzato il format allargato di questa iniziativa e ringrazio Boris per l'invito e anche per come ha gestito la discussione. Erano 3 le linee principali all'ordine del giorno, ma le sollecitazioni che sono emerse da un dibattito che, come detto, è stato molto franco, molto diretto, sono state tantissime e saranno oggetto quindi di altri incontri. Al centro di ogni discussione naturalmente il conflitto in Ucraina che si protrae da oltre 1000 giorni. Rispetto a questo l'Italia ha ribadito, confermato ancora una volta il pieno sostegno e il supporto totale nei confronti dell'Ucraina e della sua popolazione nella controversia profonda nella convinzione profonda che le contrapposizioni, le controversie tra gli Stati debbano essere regolate dalla politica e dalla diplomazia nel rispetto del diritto internazionale e senza violazioni. In sintesi e semplificando, la legge del più forte non deve prevalere. Noi auspichiamo una pace giusta e duratura. Sin dall'inizio il governo italiano ha sostenuto il popolo ucraino, che è determinato con molta fierezza e molta forza a difendere i valori di democrazia, di pace e di libertà e a difendere il sacrosanto diritto della sovranità territoriale. Come voi sapete, l'Italia ha e continua a farlo, fortemente aiutato il popolo ucraino con l'invio di ben 9 pacchetti di aiuti militari per un totale complessivo di quasi 2,5 miliardi ed è in via di definizione il 10° pacchetto, ma non solo questo, l'Italia è impegnata in modo massiccio con mezzi e personale per rafforzare con una postura di deterrenza e di difesa per rafforzare il fianco est della NATO. Lo abbiamo fatto, continuiamo a farlo con convinzione. Abbiamo anche sottolineato nell'ambito di questo incontro l'Italia è fortemente impegnata e anche molto motivata nel sottolineare l'importanza della coesione della comunità degli utenti, l'impegno congiunto per la soluzione politica e diplomatica delle crisi in corso e dei conflitti in corso. Purtroppo sono molti gli scenari di conflitto. Abbiamo tutti quanti sottolineato la necessità anche di consolidare il pilastro europeo della NATO e di rafforzare la base industriale della difesa europea e di incrementare tutte le iniziative dell'Unione Europea che dovrà contribuire alla stabilità internazionale anche con una maggiore autonomia. L'Europa, dal nostro punto di vista, deve investire di più per la sicurezza e agire da protagonista per garantire la pace e la stabilità nello scacchiere internazionale. E ancora, voglio aggiungerlo anche in conferenza stampa, guardiamo con estrema preoccupazione naturalmente condivisa da tutti, preoccupazione alla crescente instabilità che proviene dalle aree quali Medio Oriente, ma anche dalle regioni Indo-Pacifiche di cui abbiamo parlato, il continente africano, che sono centrali non solo per la nostra sicurezza e per la nostra libertà, per il nostro benessere, ma che sono centrali per l'equilibrio globale. Noi abbiamo anche ribadito infine il nostro impegno e anche l'auspicio comune e condiviso affinché cessino le ostilità in Medio Oriente, siano rilasciati tutti gli ostaggi ancora detenuti e vengano poste davvero le basi per una pace che sia duratura, basata sul principio di due popoli e due stati. Grazie ancora per questa opportunità e anche per lo stile che è stato dato ai lavori di confronto estremamente sincero e diretto e direi anche costruttivo.
And we had a very constructive exchange. Jörg Blank gets the first question from New Zealand. Minister Pistorius. We were warned recently that there may be cargo that could be set on fire in airplanes, and then just today a plane crashed in Vilnius due to an issue like that. We heard that Moscow might have its hands in that, and so what have you done so far to protect aviation from such attacks? The answer, the Ministry of Defense has no insights as to whether there was an explosive charge and where it would have come from. And I think this question should be directed to the Ministry for Infrastructure because it concerns civilian aviation. But of course, we've talked about this issue. We need to increase our awareness for cargo shipping, and we also know that there is no 100% security in this field, but the gaps that there are and that are identified need to be closed, and both military and civilian aviation are aware of this. Markus Decker has the next question. Minister Pistorius, your colleagues just talked about how more defense efforts are only possible based on with the support of the citizens. Now we're facing an election campaign for the German parliament where this topic will play a role, and where the topic will probably not turn out the way, evolve the way you would want it to be, where various parties, maybe even unexpectedly, will tell the citizens, oh, it's not that bad in Ukraine and we don't need to do more and we can keep things as they are. How do you see that situation? How do you personally want to address it? First of all, I share the situation regarding the Alternative for Germany party and the BSW party and all the other parties that their supporters are aware of the fact that some have more or maybe a little less his enthusiasm or support for the topic of investing in defense. If we don't invest in defense, we will not be able, as largest partner in Europe, in NATO, to, together with our NATO allies, generate and secure the deterrence we need in order to deter a conflict that could loom for us, deter threats or then avoid threats, and conduct successful deterrence. So I don't see that threat. In the service reports, I see that there is an increased willingness to prepare country for defense and generate defense preparedness. And in these polls, I see a clear majority in Germany for an increase of the defense budget. I think that this is inevitable, but that may not come to you as a surprise, because I've been saying that so many times over the past 1.5 years at any chance I get, and I would like to tell you once again, there is no alternative to that. We have to do that, invest more for the reasons I just outlined. Next question for Marek Stile-Jelinski from TVP World. I hope I pronounced the name correctly.
Thank you. This will be a question to Deputy Prime Minister Kosiniak-Kamysz in Polish. Panie premierze, w kontekście dzisiejszej katastrofy w Wilnie, nie wiemy, co stoi za tym incydentem, ale wiemy o poprzednich próbach wysadzenia samolotów w Niemczech. Czy uważa pan, że ten incydent mógł być efektem rosyjskich ataków hybrydowych przeciwko państwom NATO i czy Polska obawia się podobnych działań?
So it's about the plane crash in Vilnius.
Pewne wyjaśnienie katastrofy musi nastąpić i wymaga czasu. Jesteśmy w kontakcie z naszymi partnerami na Litwie w ramach Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego, w ramach Unii Europejskiej. Na pewno to będzie przedmiotem intensywnego śledztwa i wyjaśnienia wszystkie związki, jeżeli jakiekolwiek zaistniały pomiędzy działaniami związane z tym wypadkiem, a można byłoby w jakikolwiek sposób znaleźć zaangażowanie obcych państw w to działanie, no to jest najpilniejszy temat do wyjaśnienia. Musimy to mieć wyjaśnione, będziemy tutaj wspierać naszych przyjaciół z Litwy w celu wyjaśnienia przyczyn. Niezmiennie od tego dochodzi niestety do ataków hybrydowych na każdy Nikt nie jest od tego wolny, nie ma państwa w Europie, które byłoby wolne od ataków hybrydowych, nie ma państwa, które byłoby wolne od akcji sabotażu i dywersji. Oczywiście nasilenie na wschodniej flance jest większe pewnie, ale każdy państw, tak jak tutaj wszyscy stoimy, prowadzi wszystkie możliwe działania, żeby takie akty dywersji, sabotażu zatrzymywać i przeciwdziałać. Bardzo ważne jest to, co powiedział pan minister Pistorius, bezpieczeństwo lotów zarówno cywilnych, jak i lotów transportowych. Jeżeli gdzieś są jeszcze jakieś przestrzenie, które trzeba uzupełnić, to musimy to zrobić.
Aviation and transport aircraft is of great importance, and we need to close security gaps if there are any. Next question from Eza Koleza from Le Monde.
Merci, bonjour. Je voudrais savoir à partir de quand est-ce qu'on peut envisager l'envoi
Thank you very much. I would like to know
avant ou après un cessez-le-feu.
At which point we can expect European troops on the ground in Ukraine, maybe after a ceasefire in Ukraine, and when can we expect that basically? And when do you think will there be contractors to be deployed there? Yeah, I saw the article, the news report in the newspaper Le Monde, and I was surprised to read it, and I honestly hadn't quite understood it, because the French president is planning a conference to be held in February, and at this conference we want to think about what we can do differently in the future and what we can do additionally on top of what we already do for Ukraine. And we held that in February, and he said there was no taboo. We need to at least think about all opportunities that present themselves, and so there are various projects that we are thinking about or discussing, and even in this format we thought about how we can increase the production of weapon systems so that we can produce more weapon systems close to the front lines. So these are initiatives that we are pursuing right now. There are many other initiatives as well, for example, in the Black Sea, and you are familiar with all those initiatives. But to answer your questions, I have no new insights, except from what the French president said in February of this year, to be precise.
Non, mais je ne fais pas de casuistique. J'encourage pour les interprètes pour traduire le mot, mais je ne fais pas de casuistique. Et si. Je renvoie à ce qui avait été dit par le président.
I don't want to answer to questions like that, to these hypotheticals, if, that there is no point in answering hypothetical questions. The next question.
Thank you. Hi, dear ministers, thank you for your time coming here together. I have a short question for all of you. You were talking about defense spendings and increasing the support for Ukraine. Obviously, there are difficulties with the household and reaching the existing NATO goal of 2%. Would each of you be okay with raising the NATO goal to 3%?
Well, I just mentioned it's. In the first place, it's about talking about 2%, 2.5%, 3%, or even more. But the main purpose, the main objective has to be to fulfill the capability requirements, to be able to do what is necessary to achieve an effective deterrence and defense strategy. This is what we have to talk about. And of course, taking the expected requirements at the end of next year, we probably will talk about more than 2%. Everybody knows that. But anyway, we have to do more, and we do have to do it in time.
Oui, pour la partie française, l'affaire est déjà actée.
Yes, for France.
Ces 2% ont déjà été atteints et qu'on va continuer.
I can only say, we have reached the 2%, and we will continue down this path.
Après, est-ce que ça sera suffisant? Déjà,
billion by year 2031. Will they be enough? We don't know.
Le même modèle d'armée. Pour John Healey et pour moi-même, vous avez la dissuasion nucléaire.
Each country has its own model for the armed forces. We have nuclear deterrence and defense in France. So we make a large contribution here. The UK does too. So can we count it into the 2%? Other countries have expeditionary forces, rapidly deployable forces, which others in turn don't. So they can deploy their expeditionary forces to various continents, to Africa, to the Indo-Pacific. One force, other countries may have strong naval forces. So large part of the 2% are these countries invested into their navies. So why am I saying that? Well, we need to reach that 2% goal. We have to reach it. We have to go beyond it. Is 2% the floor, not the ceiling? The answer is yes. But we are Europeans, and I'm also answering the question that was asked to Boris in the Bundestag in the Federal Parliament. What are we doing with the money? What is our requirement? What do we need for our deployments? What is the use of that money? What are the real threats in Europe? Threats we all share. And what are the country-specific threats? Poland, for example, has very different needs, very different requirements, different defense plans on the eastern border than France, for example. France is located in the west of Europe, so we have different plans for defense. And our threats are mostly emanating from Africa or the Middle East and are of great concern to us. And so that means we are increasing our defense budget, but the question that needs to be asked is how can we use that money in the most efficient way? Of course, joint procurement initiatives like ELSA, like DPS, the precision strike weapons, and then there's also technological contributions that we want to make, and where we need to make further developments. And that is what matters at the end of the day. That's something that I'm strongly supporting also within NATO. We do need the 2%, but what we need on top of that is a useful purposeful use of those 2% in the military sphere, because if we only have those 2%, that will basically constitute a lie to our citizens. If we don't fully equip and train our armed forces, and if they don't have the right mindset and the right sense of morale, which basically is what the Ukrainians are displaying so valiantly. And over the past 2.5 years, I've been having the honor of serving as the Minister of Staff for the Armed Forces in a country where we have faced many losses. We've had many casualties in our armed forces. We commemorated a young woman today who passed away in a car accident in Lebanon in an armored vehicle on the border between Israel and Lebanon as part of a UN mandate, of a UN mission. And so this is not only about money, it is about courage, about bravery, and about our ability as Europeans to respond to the threats of today, wherever they may emanate from. Of course, we need money, but money alone is not a solution.
I think we all welcome the fact that for the first time this year, 23 of the NATO nations will be spending 2.5% at least of GDP on defence. We five here recognise that we need to do more, we need to spend more to reinforce European defence and security for the future. In the UK, we have a commitment to increasing defence spending to 2.5% of GDP. The last time that the UK spent 2.5% of GDP on defence was in 2010 with the previous Labour government. And as a new Labour government, we, within 4 months of taking office, are increasing our defence budget next year by almost £3 billion.
Wolność potrzebuje siły, a siła potrzebuje pieniędzy. To jest moim zdaniem łatwe do przewidywania, co się wydarzy, jeżeli utracimy zdolność do zwiększania wydatków. Jeżeli w takim momencie jak teraz, w czasach, gdzie zagrożenie jest naprawdę najpoważniejsze od zakończenia II wojny światowej, nie będzie zrozumienia w naszych państwach na rzecz zwiększenia wydatków na obronę. To każdy z państw, tak jak czyni. Oczywiście są różne elementy zagrożenia. Inne są, tak jak powiedział Sebastian, inne są dzisiaj dla Polski. Kraju przygranicznego, inne są dla Francji, inne są dla Niemiec, inne są dla Wielkiej Brytanii, ale dla wszystkich są. Światy są bardzo małe, a wojny są bardzo szybkie. I rozgrywają się nie tylko w przestrzeni związanej z użyciem czołgów, samolotów, ale rozgrywają się w tej przestrzeni, którą też trzeba inwestować, w tyle przestrzeni w każdym innym wymiarze. To też potrzebuje zwiększenia naszych wydatków. Ja uważam, że Unia Europejska robi dzisiaj za mało jako całość. Jeżeli Unia Europejska nie obudzi się tym względem wydatków, zwiększonych wydatków na przemysł zbrojeniowy, to naprawdę nie wykorzystamy tej możliwości i tego czasu, który dzisiaj mamy. Bo my mamy dzisiaj, a za chwilę go możemy.
Italy has, over the years, together with the allies, made certain in tutte le sedi deputate che c'è un nodo da togliere, che è quello di svincolare le spese militari dal patto di stabilità. È una questione che è al centro dell'agenda e anche della discussione europea ed è il nodo. In generale l'obiettivo delle spese militari che riguarda naturalmente il potenziamento delle nostre forze armate è un obiettivo al quale guardiamo con attenzione e con impegno, anche perché riteniamo, e l'Ucraina l'ha insegnato, che la pace e la libertà abbiano sempre un prezzo. Inoltre, come dicevano i colleghi, ci troviamo ad affrontare in tutti i domini, in quelli vecchi, in quelli tradizionali, in quelli nuovi e in quelli emergenti, sfide multidimensionali, sfide sempre più ibride, e gli scenari sono tutti caratterizzati da una instabilità ormai pervasiva. New challenges, high-range challenges, instability is increasing, the world has become smaller, the threats are more noticeable. Scenarios that 6-7 years ago were hardly felt at all now show that military spending is necessary to secure peace, stability and security, and we're doing that. We're doing that, for example,
example, we have sent 2,000 personnel to the eastern flank as deterrence, but we also need a common line in order to take decisions together as to how we want to spend the funds. Unfortunately, we don't have much time left, so this is a question, but for ARD. I have a question to Boris Pistorius. You talked about the development of long-range weapons, and my question would be, now that there's a new administration, is there new urgency? Do you have a plan B in case that capability gap is not being closed by the Americans as of 2026? And have you made any concrete or taken concrete decisions about the development of European long-range weapons? Today we talked about wanting to increase our efforts for their development, if that is possible. Technically, there are huge challenges that we're faced with, but we are doing everything to pick up speed here. That's true for the UK, France, Germany, and Poland.
Nein, es gibt keinen Plan B,
weil die
Entscheidung
because the decision of the US to temporarily station missiles in Germany is already 6 months old. Immediately we got to work to start development projects. There are no signs at all that this decision would be revoked. If it was, then we would have to sit down again and think about other interim solutions. There's no plan B for that, but I don't think we should speculate about alternatives publicly now. That brings this press conference to an end. Thank you very much. Please remain seated for a moment so that we can escort you outside safely.